Welcome back to season 2 of Shaboom, and I'm very, very excited about season 2. This is the podcast for and all about my generation, the baby boomers. I'm Rick K. Jones. I'm your host and guide. Just a reminder that season 1, we have 25 episodes of season 1. They're out there. You can find them on Spotify, Apple, iHeart. If you're so inclined. We had a great first season with a lot of wonderful guests, a lot of great topics. And if you haven't listened to us, I encourage you to do so. Season 2 is going to have an overall theme. The theme is turning success into significance. We're going to talk a lot about how to finish this race we call life in meaningful ways. Finish the race, as we like to call it. Now, guys, no matter how I do the math, I keep trying to do it over and over. Unfortunately, I'm in the fourth quarter of my life. I recently turned 72. I wish it were halftime, but I don't think so. I think I'm in the fourth quarter. I've read the scoreboard, and I realize, getting late in the game. But what do great teams do in the fourth quarter? Well, they find ways to win. And we're going to talk a lot about winning this season, winning in this fourth quarter of our lives. And winning starts with the word of the day, which is attitude. Attitude is the theme of this episode. I have a 4-year-old grandson, Levin, and one of the things that we do together is we watch Curious George videos. He loves Curious George, and he only wants to watch them with me. And so that's something that we do. We record them on Sesame Street. Well, usually before the episode of Curious George starts, there's a little Sesame Street episode called Word of the Week. And, words do matter. My friend Carl Thomas, who was on the show last year, shameless plug for Carl. He has his own podcast called The Best Boss Ever podcast series. He talks about words matter, and he asks each of his guests what their favorite word is. And so each week we're going to have a word that we kind of theme the episode around. And like I said, today the word is attitude. Let's start with the song of the week, because it is a great song about attitude. It's Queen's famous anthem, "We Are the Champions." And every time I hear that, it takes me back to certain games, certain places, certain victories in life. It really is a song about attitude, about a very positive attitude. The other songs on our weekly musical playlist are also about attitude. We've got a classic Bill Withers song called Lovely Day. Again, song about getting up in the morning, having a great attitude. We have a song by Katrina and the Waves called Walking on Sunshine. Again, your attitude determines your altitude. We've got a wonderful song by Tim McGraw, who's one of my favorite country music stars, called Live Like You're Dying. It's a great song. Think about it. If you live like you're dying, you're going to live a rich life. And finally, one of my favorite songs, the great Pharrell Williams, has a classic song called Happy. And this is a song all about attitude. If you know me, or if you've listened to some of our other podcasts in the past, you know that I love sayings. I actually wrote a book about 52 of my favorite sayings. It's called Analog Advice in a Digital World, a baby boomer's words of wisdom for the millennial generation. And what it is 52 of my favorite sayings. And so I collect sayings like other people collect stamps or coins or whatever. And there's so many great sayings about attitude. I mentioned one a minute ago. Your altitude is determined by your attitude. And it is so true. Here's another one. The person who says he can and the person who says he can't are both equally right. It's all about your attitude. The great theologian and author Robert Schuller said, always look at what you have left, never look at what you have lost. I've always been a half full guy. You have half of a cup of water, is it half empty or is it half full? Well, it's the same amount of water, but it's how you look at it. Most people go, it's half empty. Well, no, it's half full. I still have something left. Mark Burnett, who's a great Hollywood producer, he's produced a lot of great television shows, has a great saying. He says, attitude produces character, and character produces hope. I love that. And finally, the great John Maxwell says this: people may hear your words, but they feel your attitude. It's a difference. How is your attitude? Attitude is essential for us baby boomers in our fourth quarter, because we're going to have aches and pains. We're going to have issues that we never thought we would have when we were young. And it's all determined by how we respond to those. It's all about our attitude. Speaking of scoreboards, this week is the start of March Madness, and nothing in the world of sport captures our imagination like the NCAA basketball tournament and the 3 weeks of March Madness. And folks, it looks like this thing's wide open this year. There are a bunch of really, really good teams. In fact, I wrote down the other day that I thought there were 11 teams that I thought legitimately had a chance to win the national championship. So I think it's going to be really, really fun. And watch, none of my 11 will, and somebody outside of that's going to end up winning the national championship. So I expect a great and compelling tournament with a lot of surprises. But I know this: attitude is going to determine who wins. Who has a positive attitude when things go bad? Who can rally when things don't go their way? When you get an injury or a bad call or get a slump, the ball won't go in the basket. Your attitude is going to determine the success in this tournament. My guest today is my friend Roger Ferguson. Roger is the Chief Marketing Officer of the V Foundation for Cancer Research. I first met Roger when he was my client at Capital One. Roger spent 23 years there at Capital One, head of advertising, and he developed all those iconic ads that we love so much. The whole idea of what's in your wallet, that's Roger Ferguson. Spike Lee directing all these great commercials with Charles Barkley and Samuel L. Jackson and others, that's Roger Ferguson. He bought some unique sponsorships. He sponsored Taylor Swift's tour, iHeart's Jingle Balls, the NCAA basketball tournament, the college football playoff, and many, many more. But he left the V Foundation a few years ago. Again, we're talking about trading success for significance, and he came to the V Foundation. But then, like so much in life, he got a major, major curveball. He's the chief marketing officer of an organization that is trying to raise money to cure cancer, and he got cancer. He got cancer, and he was very, very sick, and we're going to spend time today talking about not only his career, but the fight against cancer and the irony of what he was doing and what came from that. So let's welcome Roger to Shabbat. Hey, Roger, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. It's all mine.
Well, I always start with every guest with, where were you raised, and who were some of the people in your life when you were young that really influenced you?
Well, that's great. Let's see, I was born and raised in Fairfax, Virginia, raised by a single mother. So pretty much everything that I believe I am and everything that's important to me came from my mother. And one of the things she taught me hard work. So that we'll talk more about that in a minute. But I was kind of, I guess, a typical boy. I was outside all the time, loved playing baseball, football, riding my bike, kind of anything to be outdoors. It was just fantastic. I spent my summers, another thing, kind of talking about hard work. Spent my summers after baseball season. We'd go down to my uncle and aunt's farm in West Virginia. Quite honestly, it was kind of a vacation, but the vacation was we'd get up at soon as the sun was breaking, and we'd go out in the hay fields and bale hay and run cattle and stuff and work till it was dark. I didn't know any better. It was fantastic. It was just a great way to live and everything. And then let's see, as I got older, I went to George Mason University, where I met my wife, Kathy. Um, we had our first date on April 26, 1985, to be specific. And 41 years later, we are still together. So that's kind of a little snapshot of who I am.
No, that's really interesting. Charlotte and I will celebrate our 41st in June,
Fantastic.
so we're the same
Congratulations.
same kinda situation. You know, it's interesting, I grew up in Atlanta in
Yeah.
DeKalb County, and when I was coming through public school, DeKalb County was considered the second best school system in the country, second only to Fairfax County, Virginia.
Fairfax County. Yep. I'm a product of Fairfax County Public Schools.
Yeah, and they were great schools.
Yeah.
And then, I guess when Georgia Mason made the great run in the tournament a few years ago, you had to have been just thrilled with, how that all came down.
It was
Uh,
fantastic, Rick, and probably one of the biggest regrets of my life. I was asked to go to that Final Four, and I couldn't make it. Didn't honestly, I didn't do enough to make it, and holy smokes, that's
yeah.
likely to never happen again.
Well, Jim Larinaga, I think he was
Yeah,
Terry Holland's assistant for years at
yeah,
Virginia and then got the George Mason job. And I remember when he took the job, everybody's like, this is a dead end. This is like
yeah,
a career
yeah.
killer. And he was like, no, no, we can win here.
He
And
leveraged that. He did a pretty nice job.
yeah, he really, really, really did. So you go to George Mason. What'd you major in?
I majored in marketing.
Okay. And then when you came out, did you go immediately to Cap One, or was there a
I did
series of
not. I actually, I started at a few small advertising agencies, which honestly was fantastic. I loved kind of that small agency vibe. It got me an opportunity to, quite honestly, to wear a bunch of hats, and kind of touch and learn things that you probably don't get to do at larger companies. You know, I got to I got to work on strategy, media. I also got included in meetings with senior client partners right from the jump. So I thought it was great. And it's one of the things, I've got two daughters that are 26 and 30. And I tell them, man, get in there when you're first starting out and be curious, learn everything you can, just be a sponge. And I think, that was, I really took that to heart, and I thought it was just a great experience.
Yeah, I tell young people all the time, early in your career, take the opportunity over the money. The
Absolutely.
money will come with talent and skills. And then I also remind everybody, somebody will come to me and they'll go, well, I got 5 years of experience. And I'll go, well, not really.
Right.
You got 1 year of experience repeated 5 times. And you don't want it. But in a
Yeah.
small
Yeah.
agency, you get to wear a lot of hats and you get to do a lot of stuff that I think is a great place to start.
It was fantastic. Looking back now, and I think about, you talk about the money, I the little bit that I think I earned was, I don't even know that I got anything other than a whole bunch of education, which was fantastic.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I've admired about you was the great work you did at Capital One. But, I really believe that environment. Somebody asked me one time, describe Capital One. I said, most companies are why companies. Capital One is a why not.
Absolutely. The one thing I loved about it, and I was there for 23 years and had the privilege of leading the advertising, media, sponsorship, brand strategy teams over time. Um, and we were a challenger. All the banks and credit card companies have been around forever. Capital One was a spinoff in 1993. So when I got there, it was 6, 7 years old. Nobody knew who Capital One was. I mean, we used to joke, a true story, that when we would send out mail at the time, plain white envelope would draw better than the Capital One branded envelope. That's how much the brand stood for. Fast forward now, there's 99% unaided awareness, Fortune 100 company, and quite honestly, I'm extremely proud of my time there, and being a part of building that brand from unknown to, quite honestly, a household name, which was pretty cool opportunity.
No, there's no question. But also I think people see the what I call the glitz and the glamour of
Yeah,
sponsorships like the
yeah,
NCAA or the Jingle Balls,
yep.
or the commercials with Spike Lee, but the offer to the consumer has always been superior.
It
You
was,
know,
yeah,
it just is.
it was
Um,
fantastic. And that was one of the things we always said is like, listen, from the advertising to your point, we can get our name out there. If your product doesn't back it up and your experience doesn't back it up, you're dead in the water. So that was something, that's what I really loved about Capital One is we were maniacal over everything that over managing the things that matter, which was great. The other thing I loved was that entrepreneurial spirit, from Rich Fairbank, the founder and CEO, just he was a strategic consultant himself. So it was very much strategy driven. And then everything was, if it was grounded and made sense, man, we're gonna go test it and try it. And I love that challenger spirit.
well, I you're kind of rare today. I just keep saying you as Capital One, but I'm 72 years old. I used to think brands would take more chances early in my career. It just was. And I'm not against data. I'm not against testing, but at some point you got to say, look, this is just a big idea. I mean, instinctively, this is a big idea, and you got to have senior management that goes, okay, let's run with it. Let's do it.
It was great because paradoxically, at its core, Capital One is a risk management company. When you're loaning money via a credit card, it's easy to loan it. It's harder to get it back. On the marketing side, boy, we did take some grounded chances. And quite honestly, from the CEO down, which, in hindsight is rare, that, he was willing to say, you know what? I've seen enough of the data. I don't need to see any more. This stuff is paying back. Let's go keep pouring fuel in that fire and let's see how high up is. And boy, was he right.
No question. And then again, just award-winning work, but more importantly, it wasn't the awards, it was the business results. You
A-
know?
Absolutely. That's one thing people would come up to us and, within the halls of Capital One and say, oh, you guys are lucky. You get to go see Jen Garner and Sam Jackson and Spike Lee and go to the Jingle Ball and all, put all those things together. First of all, as you know, that's hard work. That stuff
No, it
doesn't just
is.
happen.
People
Yeah,
think that all we do is just eat big shrimp and drink,
exactly. It's
cocktails.
it's all
Yeah.
an expense account. And the thing I'm most proud of, as you said, was we drove results. I mean, we made Capital One a household name and then drove products off the shelf, quite honestly.
Well, then you make a big pivot. What made
Yeah.
you leave to go to the V Foundation?
So it's funny you ask. About 3 years ago, I'd always kind of thought, someday I'd love to do something charitable and give back a little bit. And if I'm being honest with myself, I talked about it and I never acted on it. And I got to the point about 3 years ago where I said, you know what, I've done a lot here. Very proud. I love Capital One. Loved what I did. Loved my manager, Mark Mentry, the chief brand officer there. We're still friends to this day. Uh, and I said, you know what? I think I'm done. I'm going to retire. He asked me, would you stay one more year? We were just launching the Major League Baseball sponsorship. He said, would said, of course. I'm not fleeing anything. And I honestly thought that I, wasn't going to work. Maybe at some point I'd go do a little consulting or eventually maybe do something charitable. And you know how those plans work out. Was it Mike Tyson said, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the mouth. Um, 8 days after my retirement, Mark, my old boss at Capital One, called me and said, hey, you always said you'd want to do something charitable. Is it too soon? I said, no, what are you thinking? He said, well, would you be willing to talk to the folks at the V Foundation for Cancer Research? They have a chief marketing officer opening. So short story is I said, yeah, I'll be willing to talk to them. I knew them, as you know, uh,
From the
ESPN
sports
and
stuff.
ESPYS
Yeah.
was a
Oh, yeah.
was a
Sure.
sponsor,
Yeah. Yeah.
longtime sponsor. So I knew of the V and held them in high regard. Said, sure, I'll talk to him. And I talked to at the time the CEO in Jacobson, and just the more I talked, the more I said, This place I've got to be." Not only anybody our age that's seen Jim Valvano's speech at the ESPYS, first of all, still gives me goosebumps when I see. So, that excited me. And then when I heard more about the plan, all the great work that the V Foundation has done in the previous, at the time, was 30-year anniversary, but there was a vision over the next 6, 7 years to really accelerate granting of research. And that, that vision excited me. I really am at the stage in my career. I don't want to just be 1 or 2% better at something. The idea of building something and like, let's go really 3 or 4x the granting to go make a difference. That excited me. You uh, as a brand marketer, the V Foundation brand. I mean, it's just, to build on top of that, it was just a fantastic opportunity. So, you know, I more I talked, I jumped at the chance, and it's been about 3 years ago, I took on the role of being the chief marketing officer at the V Foundation for Cancer Research.
Well, uniquely, V, unlike other cancer-related charities, is 100% about research. They're 100% about finding a cure. And I love the fact that because of endowments, 100% of what you donate to the V Foundation is going to go to a research grant, not 80%, 100%.
Rick, I,
And
I, I need to put you out there as our PSA. You're exactly right. There are kind of four things that really intrigued me about the V, and that I'm really proud of is, as you said, we are maniacally focused on cancer research. There are plenty of other organizations that do great work throughout the cancer journey, but we are solely about research because we know that's the only way we're gonna find breakthroughs and new protocols and treatments to ultimately achieve victory over cancer. That's just the only way. And we fund across all cancer types also, because we know a breakthrough in one cancer type can be ported over, and it may accelerate the learnings in 2, 3, 4 other cancers to eventually get breakthrough. As you said, kind of the second big thing that I'm really proud of is our fiscal responsibility. You mentioned our 100% pledge. 100% of direct donations go to cancer research. Like you said, not 80, not 90, 100%. We have a very generous endowment that covers our costs, and still we try to keep costs as low as possible. On top of that, we've got a 13 consecutive years of Charity Navigator, their top 4-star rating, which puts us in the top 2% of all charities. Very proud of our fiscal responsibility. Also, we talked about granting research. That's kind of the third leg of our stool. I believe we've got a superpower of finding the best of the best. Not only are we fiscally responsible with the generous donations, but we want to make sure they go to the best of the best researchers, and we fund high risk, high reward research that's grounded. But our government, that no one's putting money there with new researchers that are just coming out. We talked about being a young marketer coming out. These young researchers coming out, starting up their labs, have got great ideas. They don't have funding.
yeah, you don't
So
have to be a tenured guy. You got an idea, we'll fund an idea.
and man, the more we talk to some of these young researchers who are just absolute wizards, they have an idea. They've unfortunately probably had someone in their family, that's gone through cancer, that's motivated them to use their brain power, to go research cancer. We want to go find those people and pour gasoline on that fire and help them out. And then the last thing is, I really like the V Foundation because we care about making that impact. It isn't just, can we grant some money? Can we find those folks? Is it actually, are we putting it in the right place, and is it making an impact? We believe the answer is yes. Our grantees we've granted about $458 million over the last 32, 33 years, which is great. But our researchers, we talk about finding those early investigators. They've gone on to be connected to about 1,100 clinical trials. The thing we're also proud about is they've gone on to get, from our $458 million granting, our researchers have been connected with an additional $20 billion of follow-on research. So we believe, we're finding those right people that have great ideas, that are making progress. And, the good news, bad news, but the good news part of this is, since 1991, there's been about a 35% decrease in the cancer mortality rate. So that's that's certainly not just the V Foundation. That's all efforts, but that's a great impact. And it's one of those that it's necessary but wholly insufficient. We've collectively got a lot more work to do.
Well, I'm old enough to remember when the C word was a death sentence.
Absolutely.
It just really was from that standpoint. The other thing that I was so impressed, when my wife Charlotte got breast cancer,
Yeah.
I got a call from Shane every week. I got a call from him every week saying, "Are you happy with your treatment? What else do you need?" And, no, I got a guy, but
Yeah.
I got a guy. If you're
Yes.
not,
Yeah.
if you're not, I mean, and I was so touched by that. And candidly, I almost feel like the whole organization feels that way about every person with cancer. I mean, it's just permeates. I mean, he can't call everybody, but I just felt like there were people in the organization that really understood the human side of the disease, if that makes sense.
Completely agree. And boy, if I could brag on the people within the walls of the V Foundation, is they are exactly that. They're not only really smart people, but they're really great humans. And I'm old enough that's important to me. Is working and being surrounded by people that absolutely care and they get up every morning to go make a difference. And as you know, there's just unfortunately all of us have way too many stories of a wife, a husband, a friend, a coworker that's been touched, and it's just you know we've got to figure this out. And quite honestly, we too need more generous gifts, so we can put more money into life-saving cancer research. Because I do believe we're going to find a cure in my lifetime. We talk about victory over cancer, not let's go solve it a little bit, but let's
Let's go
go
be. I
find
love
it.
the fact that
Let's go kill it.
the goal is victory.
Victory. I want to be
Good.
out of work.
Yep.
Everybody at the V Foundation can't wait to close our doors.
Yeah. Well, you get to the V Foundation, and then, my friend, you get a curveball. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, talk about irony, if you want to use that word,
Yeah.
because it's tragedy along with irony, but you get diagnosed with cancer. Talk about
Yeah.
that.
That's one of those, kind of first, it's one of those where I was really pleased for my first 2 years at the V Foundation, doing all the great work we just talked about. I felt like it was a place I needed to be. Boy, do I feel like this was kind of everything I'd done previously in my career was to kind of build the skills and the things that I could take on my journey and do a little bit to help the V Foundation with what I know. But yeah, you're right. Literally about a year ago this month, I was down at one of our partners. We partner with the Dolphins and their Dolphins Cancer Challenge. They do an annual bike ride. Literally had just done a 40-mile bike ride for charity. I get home a couple weeks later, I notice a little lump on my throat. I kind of did the ads, probably just swollen glands, whatever. A couple weeks later, it's still there. So I go get tested and start off a series of testing. And long story short, yes, last May I was diagnosed with squamous cell carcinoma in my right tonsil and lymph nodes. Good news is we caught it early. So my plea to everybody listening to this: go get checked. You know your body. If you feel something didn't right, go get checked. Especially men our age, if I can be blunt, we suck at that. So go do it.
Yeah,
Um,
we came from what we call the suck it up generation. Just suck it up. Like sucking it up is going to make a change.
Correct. Yeah, I think about the suck it up back in the day playing football in August, and water was a treat. It was so. This was definitely the don't suck it up. We caught everything. Good news is, because of cancer research, I'm lucky enough for the type of cancer I had a very high survival rate. Caught it early, so I went through did my daily radiation and chemo treatments through the summer and fall. Ended last October. So, and the good news is, as I told you, I had my PET scan recently, and the images were clean. So, I've still got some recovery, but boy, do I feel extremely lucky. And unfortunately, my story is, I'm nothing special. There are millions
Well,
of people
the
going
sad
through
thing
stuff.
is we're seeing, Charlotte with her breast cancer,
Yeah,
she would say, "Honey, of course you're concerned, but I'm 64 years old. I'm in a waiting room with 4 girls that are in their 20s with breast cancer." And it's heartbreaking. And, when your surgeon says, we need to harvest and store your eggs because you may not be able to have, I mean, and we're seeing suddenly colon cancer just
c-
emerge, and it's gotta be
considerably
something
younger.
environmental. There's
Yeah,
gotta be something in our food or in the air, but suddenly we got all these young, healthy people getting colon cancer.
absolutely. That's something that we've we've always funded that cancer type, but it is exactly it's confounding now. What is it? Is environmental? What other factors are leading that? Because to your point, something's doing it that we don't know about yet. We've got to go figure that out. Um,
Well, one of
you know,
the questions that I'd asked Charlotte's surgeon one
yeah,
time, 'cause about research, she said, "Rick, part of the problem is in our mobile society where people move all over the place, I can't isolate like a community like I used to could do." You could say there's something environmentally in this town,
yeah, exactly.
but it's gotten more difficult because we're everywhere.
It absolutely is. One thing too you touched on was getting a call from Shane. You know, there was a big positive side to this. I didn't want to join the cancer club, but boy, joining it, there are some really cool people in it and a bunch of great warriors and fighters. And, the positive side of me from my cancer journey is, as I said, I truly believe, cancer research saved my life because my type of cancer had a protocol that was, about 90% effective, especially when caught early. So, not all cancer types can say that. We talked about colorectal, pancreatic. There are others. We there's not that success rate yet, but we're going to find it. It's through cancer research. The other couple things that I really found that I knew, but they really got driven home was, boy, my wife's an angel. After 40 years, just the things she did to help me through treatments and everything. I thought back to the suck it up. I sucked up radiation for about 3 or 4 weeks driving myself when I kind of couldn't, and she was there doing everything for me. I know she signed up for better or for worse, but I'm pretty sure she wasn't thinking that 40 years ago. And then you also talked about friends, just the little notes, the hey, thinking about you. You you reach out to me all the time, which was it just that stuff just means so much. And I know people feel I don't know what to say or whatever. It's like just send them a note. Just say, hey, thinking about you. Whatever. It's absolutely invaluable. And then the last thing I'll say on that is the workers, every person. I went to VCU Massey Comprehensive Cancer Center here in Richmond, Virginia. Lucky enough to have one of the
World
73
class. Yeah,
NCI designated
yeah,
cancer centers
yeah.
who happens to have a specialty in neck cancers. But they were from the person who parked my car to the person who checked me in, up through my oncologist. Every single person was just pillar of the earth. You know,
Well, our word for today is attitude,
yeah.
and attitude is contagious.
Mm.
You're fighting a battle. Your wife's attitude, the parking attendant's attitude, your oncologist's attitude, all that level of positivity helps you. And people that haven't been through this, it ain't no picnic. I mean,
Boy, talk about you talk about you get a little bit of that pick me up. Stu Scott said, fight, and when you can't lay down, let someone fight for you. It's true. Like when someone sends you a text, hey, thinking about you, all of a sudden, I got a little bit more attitude to go. It's funny you talk about attitude because when I first started my radiation treatments, I had daily sessions every morning at 7:15. First thing in the morning, there was a lady in there who was at the same time, she had the appointment right in front of me, and she was late in her radiation, and radiation is cumulative. So, the deeper you go into it, the more effect on your body. She would pop out of her chair and kind of bounce in with a smile on her face, greeted everybody, and I literally thought to myself, because her treatments were over. I got to see her ring the bell. We overlapped about 6 or 7 days. I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to be that. When she's no longer here, I want to be the one that everybody else in this lobby sees me bouncing up and smiling and going in, because you're right that the attitude changed everything. That radiation treatment was no picnic, but boy, if you could put a smile on everybody's face and your own, it literally, it struck me. I said, that's the little thing I'm going to do, is I'm going to carry that attitude forward.
No, that's the one thing you could control. It's not what
Exactly.
happens, it's what happens. How do you react to what
It's the
happens?
reaction. Exactly.
Yeah, and you do control that. I've told people my favorite meal of the day. I'm a breakfast guy. I mean, I'm a breakfast guy that can eat breakfast for dinner, but I'm not a continental breakfast guy. I'm a eggs and bacon and grits and biscuits kind of guy. And I often tell people, do you know the difference between the bacon and the eggs? Well, the chicken was involved, but the pig was committed.
He's committed, right?
And I gotta believe, having now had cancer, it even raised your commitment level in a way, and
Yeah.
and so sometimes
Yeah.
bad things happen to good people for a long-term reason, and I hated you had to go through it, but I think it's made you more effective now.
Completely agree. It's one of those, I truly feel blessed. To your point, I wouldn't want to go through it again. Boy, do I feel like I came out on the other side better equipped. Like, I was already committed to what we're doing at the V Foundation, but man, it's personal now. Like, it is game on. I want victory over cancer. It's just, I'm committed in a way that I never thought possible. And it's funny, our chief scientific officer, who was a dream, not only helping guide me to make sure I got the right care, but she would check in with me every Friday. And, she told me early on, it's like, you're going to have a perspective that others don't have, which is going to be great along this journey. The rest of us care, and we're empathetic and everything, but you've got a perspective that others in the foundation unfortunately have, but it is new and different.
Yeah, there's no question about that, and that changes your thinking from that standpoint, the fact that you see it, but like I said, it's y'all have made great progress, but there's still much to be done.
There is
And,
so much still to be done.
and I wanna remind we're largely this podcast is listened to largely by baby boomers, and I wanna remind them of a couple things you've said today. Number one
Yeah,
is pay attention to your body. You know
absolutely.
your body better than
Pre
anybody
and
else and be
and
able to do this.
prevention, while the treatments are great, nothing beats prevention.
Yeah. But secondly, the power of connectivity back to other people. The power of an email saying, "How you doing, pal?" The power of a text or a phone call or a visit is exponential to helping people through the journey, and everybody can find time to do that. You got to be intentional, I think, about trying to stay in touch with people, and be intentional about just and not being perfunctory about it. I mean, being real about it. That I'm genuinely concerned about you. I'm here to help you. And I said the
Yeah,
other day, if everybody would just do what they say they're going to do, you
you know,
don't have to do anything else. Just if you make it, just if you say I'm going to do this, if you tell somebody I'm going to pray for you every day, okay, it's not hard. Pray for them every day. I
it's
mean,
fu
just
it's fu it's funny you say that, Rick, because I was going to before you said it, I was gonna say, I was always one of those, like, you know what? I'm thinking about Rick today, and then I'd get busy, and I'd say, I've gotta send him a text. I get busy, and I go do something else. Like, as soon as you think about it, send the text. It takes 3 seconds, and it means the world to that person. And quite honestly, it means the world to me too, now that I'm no longer that guy who used to think, "Hey, I should send a text to them." Like, no, reach out to them. You know, make it quick. And if you're uncomfortable, you don't know what to say, tell them that. "Hey, don't know what to
yeah,
say. I'm
oh,
just thinking about
right,
you.
right,
I
right.
just, I just said a prayer for you. I just, whatever it is. That's it.
Yeah, and that's so powerful to know that you weren't alone in the journey. Even though you were alone in the treatment, you're sitting in there having that there were other people that were pulling for you. And then the last thing I wanna remind my generation is we've been blessed, many of us, with financial resources. We've been blessed with time for volunteerism. There are places you wanna make an impact, you wanna join the V Foundation, make a donation, make that a commitment to it, and then find programs that the V Foundation's doing where you can volunteer, like you can ride in that
Yeah.
dolphin
Yeah.
bike ride. You can
Yeah.
do this, you can do that. Tell me some of the things, if you can, some things that you're working on that you're kind of excited about.
Yeah. First of all, to your point, everybody, as I said, we still have so much work to do to grant more research and cure this darn dreaded disease called cancer. Go to v.org, learn more, donate. And to your point, a couple things, as I said, we're super excited that we're trying to, over the next 5, 6 years, right now, we grant about $60 million of granting research a year. We want to get to the point where we're granting $100 million a year because you know what? Uh, We just need to accelerate the pace and not just us, but everybody out there. So that's one thing we're trying to figure out. Okay, what's it take to do that? How can we go raise the funds? There's no lack of great research out there. There's a lack of funds, available. So that is the biggest thing that, over the next few years, we need, uh, we have got to get to where we're granting $100 million plus to go find cures and treatments.
Well, Jim in his speech said it so best was, "You may not save my life, but you may save someone you love's life. You may save your daughter's life, your grandchild's life," that kinda thing. And, you know, like everything else, it takes resources. It takes money. And I've got a book coming out in May called The Business Tithe,
Yeah.
and it's really aimed at small, well, not necessarily small, privately held businesses that the idea of 90%'s enough of your profit. Can you take 10% of your profit and give it? And I guarantee organizations of any size, cancer has touched those organizations. And what a great legacy to say, "We're gonna get behind the V Foundation. We're gonna make an annual donation to the V Foundation." And who knows? That that money may be the one that finds the cure.
Absolutely. And, as I said, go to v.org if you want to donate personally. I just flew back from Las Vegas last night, was down previously in Miami with our partners at Dolphins, then was out in Las Vegas with our partners, Constellation Brands, who are Corona, Modelo. They've been partners for 15 years. They're, generously donate, $2 or $3 million a year through their distributor network and through the company. So I would say to anybody listening on this podcast that has a small business or, their company, call me. We'd love to partner with you. We shamelessly, we need more funds. We gotta go put more funds into the research because I know the cures are out there. We just need to get more people on the job looking for them.
Yeah, it's again, your credit rating, your fact that 100% goes to of your donation, which is rare, goes to donations. But as you've said, you really believe, and I love this, you really believe we can find a cure. We can find victory over cancer in our lifetime, and it just takes the resources to do that.
I truly believe that. And again, just I can't wait till somebody hears when they hear their child or their wife has cancer, and it's like, don't don't worry about it. We got a treatment for that. It's not that. Holy smokes, I got cancer. So yeah, no, I truly believe that with the right funding, I know at the V Foundation for Cancer Research, I know we can find the right people to put that money into for granting their research and setting up their labs, and then let's go tackle this thing together and eradicate this.
Well, you're a living example of a guy that had great success and has now traded it for significance. It's got to be very gratifying to see what you're able to do individually, but collectively what the organization's doing. Your partners at like places like ESPN or the National Hockey League or other places, the Dolphins
Absolutely.
are doing. You know, life is a team sport. I
Oh,
have a great saying. I remind people, even the Lone Ranger didn't travel alone.
right? No, that's good. I like that.
And so, can we find partners? And that's what you're looking for. You're looking for business partners and organizational partners and event
Absolutely.
partners and all that in a way that can make a big difference.
Mm,
So,
mm,
well,
absolutely.
listen, you look great. I
Thank
mean,
you. Thank you.
you really do. And I know it's been quite a challenge, but you've weathered it. It's made you better for it. You wouldn't want to wish it on anybody, but now that you got it kind of in your rearview mirror, you're like, no, it's made me better. It's changed my attitude. It's changed a lot of things. So,
I truly feel blessed.
well, that's a great word to end on, and we're blessed to have you today. Thanks for
Thank
being
you.
part of our first show of season 2 here on Shaboom.
Rick, thank you so much for having me.
It's now time for the boom. The great Negro League and later Major League pitcher Satchel Paige had a great saying. He said, "Don't look back. Somebody might be gaining on you." Have you ever thought why the windshield of your car is so large and the rearview mirror is so small? Think about it. It's not what's behind you, it's what's ahead of you. Um, you know, The windshield allows you to control what's ahead, to see what's ahead, to make plans for what's ahead. Now, you can learn from the past, but don't live in the past. And don't let your past determine your future. And that's today's boom. It's time to get back on the road with Rick. We recently, while filming our series, United Taste of America, another shameless plug for that podcast that we do each week, where we go to each of the 50 states across the country and we tell the culinary history of our country and we pick out one iconic dish in each state. Well, a few weeks back, we found ourselves in the state of Washington, and we found ourselves in a great place in Seattle called Pike's Market. Pike's Market, wonderful place right down on the harbor. Really, really cool place. Part of it is one of the best seafood markets in the world. The fresh market actually started there in 1938, believe it or not. And they sell fresh everything. I mean, you get octopus, you can get halibut, you get shrimp, you get oysters, you get Dungeness crabs. They throw fish, which is fun, whole fish, and they'll toss them back and forth and have a lot of fun with that. But there's also other vendors down in Pike's Market. There was a vendor while we were there that had 12 different kinds of apple ciders. And you know what was cool? I paid for a cup of cider, and then as long as you had your cup, you could have all the cider you wanted. So you could sample each of the different kinds of ciders. It was really, really kind of a neat deal. They've got, obviously, at Seattle, was Seattle famous for coffee. And there were all kinds of wonderful coffee vendors with fresh roasted coffees from all over the world. That was really, really fun. They had arts and crafts. They had T-shirts. They had wines from Washington. Washington's become a very famous wine state now. And within the market itself, they have some terrific restaurants. So it's clearly a bucket list place for everybody. And if you haven't been there, I encourage you to do it next time you're on the road. And that's today's On the Road with Rick. It's now time to take our trip down memory lane, which we do each week. I was blessed to have grown up in a little tiny suburb of Atlanta called Avondale Estates. Went to Avondale Elementary, went to Avondale High School, went to First Baptist Church of Avondale, very much ingrained in that community. And because of Facebook and social media gets a lot of complaints and a lot of criticism these days. But one of the beautiful things is you can stay in touch with people from anywhere that maybe you had a relationship with in the past. And because of Facebook, we actually have an Avondale High School alumni Facebook page. And unfortunately, a lot of the times it's about somebody of my generation that has passed and the funeral arrangements and that kind of thing. But they recently had a reunion in Atlanta, and it was good to see the pictures of people that, hell, they've all become old. I hope I don't look that old. I guess I'm old, but I don't feel old. They looked old. But when I was at Avondale Elementary, we had a PE teacher named Frank Walker. And Frank Walker is the reason I became a teacher and a coach. He was the reason. Loved Mr. Walker. Loved everything about teaching PE, about being a teacher, about being a coach. And it's really interesting when you look back at your life, and we do that as baby boomers. We look back. Who influenced you? Who made a difference in your life? Who's on your list? I've got a long list, but it started with the 7th grade PE teacher by the name of Frank Walker. So it's now time for the last word. This is my final thought for the week. We do this each week. Next week is Jersey Mike's National Day of Giving, Wednesday, March the 25th. It's a day that all sales, not proceeds, all sales, 100% of sales go to local charities. Last year, they raised $30 million for charity in one day. So the franchisee donates their time, donates their products, donates everything, and all of the money goes. In Charleston last year, the money went to the MUSC Children's Hospitals. It's really a cool thing. Again, we mentioned our United Taste of America podcast series. New Jersey's the 3rd state in the union. And back in January, we featured New Jersey, and we featured an interview with Caroline Jones, who runs the flagship Jersey Mike's store in Point Pleasant, New Jersey. And we talked a lot about their National Day of Giving and some of the things they do from a charitable standpoint. Now, here's what I like to do. I like to go on Wednesday, and then I like to go back on Thursday. I go on Wednesday when I know all the money's going to charity, and I can go on Thursday and thank the guy for what he did the day before, because they got to make a living too. And so that's what I do, and I would encourage you to do that. So get out there and have lunch at your local Jersey Mike's next Wednesday, March the 25th. I want to thank Roger Ferguson for being my guest today, and for each of you for listening in today to Shaboom as we start our 2nd season. We hope to see you right back here again next week for another edition